So I am really looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be a great time, but I do want to take a moment to introduce our speakers. So today we have Rob Crowley. He's the CSO here at Dataminr. We have Rachel Briggs, who's the CEO and founder of the Clarity Factory, and Chris Hurst, who's the VP of AI and Innovation at Crisis 24. So I do want to take a minute to give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves. And Rob, we will kick it off with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin, and thank you to everyone that's joined. So, Rob Crowley, Chief Security Officer at Dataminr and Head of Corporate Security Partnerships. Super excited to be with these two massive thought leaders. And I was just telling Chris and Rachel that if I wasn't on this panel, I would be joining this panel because I've been following Chris's work and Rachel's work for a very long time. And yeah, look forward to the discussion. Rachel, over to you.
Thanks. It's absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you to Dataminr for being one of the sponsors of the 2026 CSO survey run by the Clarity Factory. I run the Clarity Factory. I am a self-confessed data nerd. I'm really passionate about making sure that our community is able to make genuinely data-driven decisions about what we do, how we do it, how we kind of grow. To deliver the kind of security solutions that our organizations need. And I'm absolutely obsessed with driving transformation and improvement in our community. And I think it's a really exciting time to be working in security. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation about the future demands on CSOs.
Thanks, guys. I'm Chris Hurst. My story starts as an Army diver and then building infrastructure in conflict zones like Iraq and Afghanistan and leading in risk management in the Congo. And it was there that I saw the challenge, the need for more, better, faster, more relevant, better intelligence decisions like should we put a team of civilians in Jalalabad? This was like in 2010. And the relevancy and the intelligence really mattered. And so started a company back in 2013 where we had to go train our own ML models. And it's been obviously an evolution since then. No one's really building CNNs or RNNs anymore. And so super excited to be here. I'm now the VP of AI and Innovation at Crisis 24, working with our technology and our analyst teams and the partnership recently announced with Dataminr to bring the best for our customers. Super excited about this conversation, really passionate about this.
Thank you guys so much. Let's go ahead and kick things off. So, Rachel, we'll go ahead and let you set the stage with some of your insights that were gained around AI adoption and corporate security from last year's survey.
Yeah, just to say a few words about this, really. We asked a number of questions last year about adoption of AI, attitudes towards AI, and various other different aspects. And actually, in 2026, we're asking even more questions about where exactly CSOs and their teams are getting value from AI, pressure from the business to use it, how it's impacting talent and workforce, etc. So even richer data coming out in September. I guess we wanted to include this data point because we talk a lot about pressure to use AI, and I talk a lot with CSOs about what they're thinking about, how they're thinking about using it, etc. And so we have one kind of very specific data point from last year, which is understanding where it is already being used within the function. And what you can see from this kind of pretty detailed bar chart is that the stuff that's at the top of that bar chart, which are the longer lines, show a real kind of concentration of the adoption of AI within quite a small number of areas within the function as of first half of 2025. So as you can see, highest use around kind of the intel part of the function, quite understandably, high adoption rates around physical security systems, and then sort of decreasing amounts of use around kind of GSOCs, intelligence reporting and analytics. As you go below that, really kind of much lower areas of uptake across the rest of the function and indeed in some of the auxiliary sort of aspects of functional work. This was gathered sort of around June last year. Given the way in which I'm watching conversations about AI developing in meeting rooms I sit in with CSOs, my anecdotal experience is this is changing every quarter. I sort of wish I was running the AI aspect of this survey every 3 months, because actually I think we would see our numbers changing. So I'm expecting to see some change when we get to 2026, and Chris and Rob will possibly have some more kind of up-to-date insights on how it's being adopted, given the work you do with clients on a daily basis. But I think it's interesting to me to see kind of quite patchy uptake at that point in time, and I'm expecting some changes when we're running our data in the next couple of months. And then the second thing that I wanted to there's a couple of donuts that I've thrown up on the screen, and these are kind of a couple of interesting questions we asked about attitudes towards, and we asked CSOs, the extent to which they agree or disagree with whether, firstly, on the left-hand side, our team has a solid grasp on the challenges of opportunities of AI, and on the right-hand side, whether they think their team is more cautious than the rest of the organization about using AI. So really, both of those kind of donuts tell us something about kind of keenness and willingness, and the extent to which corporate security leaders are kind of leaning into the opportunities, or kind of terrified and sort of slightly rabbits in a headlight kind of situation. What they show us, and have a look at the sort of the detail of that when you have a moment. But essentially, what they show us is kind of higher levels of optimism than I was expecting, and higher levels of confidence than I was expecting. And I often use those data points because I think they tell an interesting story about overconfidence, and perhaps people answering from a sense of we don't know what we don't know. Because certainly the conversations that I have sat in, as I say, like on a quarterly basis, I don't feel as much confidence as that in the room, and I don't feel as much uptake as those data points would presume. So it's kind of revealing and unrevealing at the same time. And I think we run at least one of those questions again in 2026. But others may have insights about what the temperature feels like within organizations you're working with right now.
Rachel, this is super fascinating, and I think it's really just pertinent to everything that's happening in today's world. And I want to shift a little bit and kind of jump into our first segment, where we're going to focus on the evolution of the CSO role. So as we continue to speak with CSOs, what do you think is the single biggest factor that's separating the traditional security team from a strategic one in 2026?
So I'm gonna cheat slightly, if that's okay, and I will give you one thing, but then I'm going to give you three things, because I think ultimately what this boils down to is, what distinguishes the sort of the really kind of highly fit for purpose for the kind of achingly out of date. And I think what you have is a leadership that wants that function to fit within the organization, fit within the culture, fit within the value chain, fit within the sort of the risk appetite, fit within the sort of how we get business done in an organization like this. And the really successful leaders I see operating within corporate security are the leaders that ask themselves, they don't just sort of walk into the organization with their corporate security sort of briefcase, open it and kind of plug and play. They come in and they ask loads of questions first, and they do an enormous intake to understand, where am I? How does this organization do business? How does it think about risk? How does it do risk? What is it making for a living? How does it generate its value? And only then does it start thinking about, then how do we build a function, in terms of both what do we need to do, but also how do we do it? How do we engage? So I think that's the one thing. I think where I might cheat slightly is talk about kind of three things just really briefly that I think are most important sitting under that, which I see as being really ignored or undervalued rather by organizations that have got a bit of catching up to do in the corporate security space. The first is around talent, and really great leaders. It doesn't matter whether you're leading security, marketing, sales, finance. Really, really great leaders they're obsessed with talent, and they're obsessed with making sure they've got the right people doing the right things with the right skill set and competencies. And Talent is a conversation we don't have often enough in our community. It just surprises me endlessly. And really, really good leaders in the corporate security space are asking themselves quite challenging questions about how do I essentially build a mixed team of all the talents? And there's obviously a lot to unpack about what I mean by that. The second thing I think that they're kind of really obsessed with is data. And this is, an area where it's sort of changing all the time. The capabilities that you can have are just, you can't even look back 6 months, 12 months and draw the same kind of picture. They're obsessed with data about kind of that helps them to understand and diagnose what's going on, understand and have a prognosis about how they should do what they do. And then at the other end, figure out, are we being effective? How do we demonstrate our value, impact, etc. So they're really obsessed with data. And then the third thing, which is something we write about a lot, is also about organizational relationships and that kind of sense that partnership is a non-negotiable. Security doesn't happen in a company just because the security team does stuff. It happens through partnership across the organization. They are leaders who recognize that there are huge dependencies and that they're only able to deliver the things that are on their to-do list if they enlist the help and support of leaders, whether it's cyber, facilities, information, etc. That partnership is an absolute non-negotiable.
I love that, and I think that's just super fascinating, great to hear about. As we think about this idea of fit and the CSO, Rob, how often do you hear that the CSO needs what we call like the seat at the table? Like, is that seat finally secured, or do you think there's a volatile risk landscape that's actually making it harder for them to stay there?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to kind of sit on the fence a little bit like I normally do. It's definitely not secure for sure. And what we see kind of echoing a little bit with what Rachel just said, but some CSOs have got much, much closer over the last 10 years to their executive leadership. And those that have are kind of aligning their security team's mission to the core objectives of the business, as well as keeping people and facilities safe. So what do I mean by that? Many of the most progressive CSOs and security teams we're working with are expected now by business leaders to be the first to detect a security event that's disrupting business and help the company respond and recover to that revenue generating event, to get the business to kind of bounce back and to manage that appropriately. In my view, there's this huge opportunity right now for CSOs and their teams. There's so much uncertainty in the world. There's so much volatility in the world that business leaders are actually expecting more and looking for some of their security teams to step up and branch out beyond the traditional sense of what a CSO and their team was doing 10, 15 years ago when I entered the space. Rachel, because I'm a huge fanboy, wrote this amazing piece, I don't know, 12 months ago, Rachel, maybe 18 months ago, around what can corporate security teams learn from the HR function and how did the chief HR officer or chief people officer rise the ranks. And it really comes down to what we hear every day and then what Rachel just said of kind of demonstrating value through kind of proactive risk management and taking the opportunity. There's a vacuum now, particularly in the geopolitical space, and maybe Chris wants to jump into this, where companies are trying to embed geopolitical risk into their actual corporate strategy. They're looking for more guidance from security teams and others across the business. And many CSOs and their teams are filling that gap that many organizations have. So for me, the seat at the table is not secure. Some of the most progressive CSOs are trusted business advisors, but the business is also looking to other places for the guidance they need. And Chris, maybe you want to jump in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the question that we're sort of asking is how has the expectation of the CSO changed related to their seat at the table? And what does that mean in terms of like, should they be more tacticians or communicators? And so I thought about this question kind of in three buckets. The first is the major events section, like the geopolitical tensions, and we'll jump into that, and then the expectations piece, and then the skills. And so starting with the major events, I'll take a macro view. In the days following sort of the end of the COVID era, many CSOs felt like there was some relief, right? US had been through social unrest, COVID, obviously. But then immediately on the heels of that, saw the geopolitical tensions, Russia, Ukraine, even in today, questions about NATO, Israel, Iran, Mexico 3 weeks ago, risk around Taiwan, the hourly changes in the Strait of Hormuz. And within each of those, the role of disinformation that's amplified with AI, which we'll get into later. And I think the insight when we speak to CSOs is that roughly 70 to 80%, it can vary by function, it can vary by industry, but 70 to 80% feel like we're in a new inflection point. COVID was one inflection point in US social unrest, and now there's this other newer inflection point given the themes I just spoke about. And so then the question is, as you said, Rob, well, what does it mean for the seat at the table? And I completely agree. Executive teams, they're feeling the same frequency. They're asking, where do I get the best information? What does it mean for my strategy? What does it mean for my supply chains, my travelers? Is this particular office area in Dubai safe? Should we move? Should we evacuate? So in addition to the rise of frequency of events we're seeing and the rise of disinformation, we're also seeing that this expectation that with AI, everything should be knowable. So the expectations among multiple dimensions are much greater. And in many areas, our executive customers, they're not wrong, right? Like AI models are objectively 100% smarter than they were at the beginning of 2025. So I'll just finish with what it means for CSOs as leaders. The word that comes to mind is multi-domain leaders. So it's not tactician or communicator. It's both. To Rachel's point, it's curiosity, it's business strategy leaders, it's technology enabled, technology aware. They have a sense of what AI can do for them, what AI cannot do for them, the superpowers on the good side and on the bad side. And I just want to finish with I still think more than ever, the classic leadership things we learned wherever we come from, the military, the corporate life, the diplomatic services, just the leadership principles, I think matter now more than ever in this environment.
Yeah, I think that's all super relevant and just amazing to kind of highlight. And as we wrap up this first segment and then piggyback off what you were talking about, Chris, we'll move on to agentic AI and then operational excellence. And we'll go ahead and hand the torch off to you, Rob. But the question is, we hear a lot about agentic AI. So for the CSOs that are, here today listening in, how does this differ from the standard AI tools that you say that they've maybe been using for the past couple of years?
Yeah, so I'm not going to geek out because I'm not smart enough to, but so how I explained this to my mum the other day when I mentioned about agentic AI, there is a difference between the AI I have to use, such as me interacting with an incredible chatbot that's got this kind of world of knowledge inside it, and I'm asking it questions, I'm prompting it and hoping that I get the answers back that I'm looking for, versus the new concept of agentic AI, which in my dumbed down version, which will upset all of the AI people, is an AI that essentially does something for me. So it's an AI that's working for me and automatically completing tasks that I've asked it to do. So I'm not having to supervise it, I'm not having to interact with it. And when you think about the corporate security function of what it is, how lean most teams are, that the likes of Chris and I work with and Rachel works with, this has opened up a whole new world of possibilities for corporate security departments. So most people I'm very, very lucky. I get to meet corporate security teams every single week, hundreds of teams that we support. And the number one challenge I hear is there's just not enough people. We're being asked to do so much. Enter agentic AI, where some of the more mundane, lower level tasks are already being outsourced to specific agents. So vertical specific agents that have been explicitly built to do something for somebody to support with the operational workflows in a security department. So one I hear most often over the last 2 years has been badging. You have a new joiner join your company. Maybe a couple of years ago, they're interacting with a person, going through the workflow to get a badge to enter an office. Now maybe they're interacting with this chatbot that's automatically taking some of the steps forward to free up the security team to be focused on some other areas. In terms of agents specifically, I think we're, to use Chris's word, we're at an inflection point. I think the world we have today is like 99.9% are humans working in security departments. And within the next 2 years, I think that changes quite dramatically. We have agents that are interacting with humans that are taking care of some of the lower level efforts the security teams are doing, including some of the research that many of the intelligence teams are working on. But my opinion on this is actually there are some critical events that it might make more sense in the future, and we're not there yet, for agents to actually manage themselves. So, for example, let's say there is an active shooter near a company headquarters, and there's 100% confidence that there is this active shooter event that's breaking right now in real time. In the future, I believe that many teams will have an agent that automatically understands there's an active shooter event and starts automating the actions that take place at that headquarters in a much faster way than a team of humans can, based upon the impact of what could happen if that action is not taken extremely quickly. So we're at the beginning of this journey of agents supporting humans inside corporate security teams. But in terms of strategic value, I genuinely believe that agents are going to give a ton more bandwidth back to the security department and actually be able to help the security team provide more strategic value to executive leadership than ever before.
Yeah, scary, but totally relevant. And I think an excellent use case, what you're saying, Rob. And then Chris, earlier, you were talking about all the different things that we've gone through the past couple of years, whether it's COVID and all the current conflicts that we're seeing. So obviously this information overload is a constant struggle. So how do you see AI helping security teams distinguish between this background noise and the true signal that requires this immediate board level attention?
Yeah, I want to start with Rob's point on what's changing and what makes this really a profound period of human history. And I want us to think, if I'm a little bit mathy, I like graphs. So imagine a graph of human capacity. And depending on your opinion of human capacity, it's either gets a little bit better over time, or maybe if you think things were better in the olden days, then maybe a little bit worse over time, but roughly flat over time with some argument. And then we're applying on that top of that capacity curve an AI curve, which objectively is exponential. And last year and for the last many years, for most use cases, the AI was just like not good enough. But we are at this point of human history where the AI is now beating PhDs on many domain tests. And again, there's plenty of risk related to AI. We'll get into some of that. But for many use cases, what was not possible even 4 months ago is now possible. And we're seeing new models come out all the time with 20% improvement. So it really is a profound period in human history. In terms of what that means for information overload, I'll give a pro, a con, and then a recommendation. Increasingly, we are seeing these smarter models understand relevance, and I think that's a key phrase that our industry has always struggled with is really relevance to me, to my function, to my company. I'm a supply, I'm a logistics company that's different than a manufacturing company. I'm a university, I'm an NGO. And so I think AI is now increasingly able to understand context. And as the models get smarter, it is up to us in the industry and to the practitioners to really understand how to best give the context, your needs, your questions to the AI. On the con, we're seeing that very soon, 99% of the information on the web will be AI generated. Some of that AI generated information will be true and valuable, and much of it will not. And I'll just speak briefly to the war with Iran in the Middle East. Over the past month, we've seen reports of FA-18 shot down by Iran. We've seen reports of massive attacks and like entire sections of Tel Aviv on fire. Many of these were started by accounts associated with the IRGC and then spread by sort of semi-official Iranian government accounts and then spread by official Iranian government accounts. And by then, the velocity is just taken off and the story is spreading like wildfire very, very quickly. And the speed of that transfer between sort of non-official to semi-official to official is occurring in the seconds, which makes us feel like it may be coordinated. One of the things I'm really excited about in the partnership with Dataminr is, Rob, you guys have spent a long time thinking about like how not to just rely purely on velocity as a signal of truth, right? Thinking about like what are bots, what are trolls, does this organization say true things or not? But I think that those questions for all of us in this space, for those of us on the solution side, on the practitioner side, ought be thinking more than ever about who are trusted, what information can be trusted, what are my partners and practitioners doing about validation.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's all over there. Just trying to weed through and figure out what's true and what's not true. And Chris, you had alluded to this idea of fear surrounding AI. So Rachel, as we think about this idea and this fear that AI will replace humans, because something I'm constantly reminded of, well, I know is simplistic, but like AI today is the worst that it will ever be. So as we think about that, can you give a concrete example of a high stakes decision that a human should make, which is actually made better because an AI handled the preliminary work?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are so many examples we could point to. I mean, I think the one that sort of most is most striking to me is really in a, as Chris just said, the ongoing conflict with Israel and Iran. We're only going to see more of that kind of activity in the years ahead in different parts of the world, right? And for business leaders having to make very difficult choices about what they do in a crisis situation of that kind. Do I pull my employees out? Where do I take them? Do I commit resources? What are the legal implications of what I do? Some of the really high stake crisis related decisions that business leaders are having to make, which have dimensions that they're not used to incorporating into their decision making basis, I think is a really good example where they want to sit across from somebody and see the whites in their eyes and the sweat on their forehead. And now I can trust this man or this woman. I can see them, they can see me, and we are going to make this decision together. So I think it's moments like that when the capability and the trust, as Chris said, the trust that you can generate as a security team really comes into its own. I think that one of the things I think is really important, sort of a cautionary tale, it's really important to tell to security leaders though, is you can't take that for granted um, because of the pressure that business leaders are on today. They are now having to think about geopolitics and the security aspects of geopolitics much more than they have done in recent memory. There are lots of people outside the organization who are also competing to be the person across the table from them as well. So it's a brilliant opportunity for security teams to really step forward and demonstrate their worth and be using AI to kind of augment what they're doing. But they mustn't take for granted either that executives know they have that capability. Executives will call on them first for that capability. They have to be making the case. They have to be telling the story. And I've given this example in discussions previously, but it's really was so striking to me. I was giving a presentation for a client. This is about a year ago. They'd gathered all of their global security team together, and just to demonstrate how important security was for this FTSE 50 company, the CFO of the company was there all day as well. And I saw him leave the room once to take a phone call. So this was not, this was a security critical organization. And I kid you not, at some point he sort of, as I was presenting and talking about geopolitics, he was looking a bit confused, and he eventually sort of put his hand up and said, Rachel, I understand why me and the executive team are interested in geopolitics, but why is my security team interested in geopolitics? And of course, to a man and a woman, everybody else in the room knew exactly why. And, there can be different reasons for why he felt that way. But but it was a really important reminder to me. Do not assume people know what you know. Do not assume they understand what capability you've got. Don't wait to be invited in. Now is you've got a great opportunity, but only if you tell your story, you get really vocal and you get in front of people. You don't have a sort of a license to operate without earning it. And so I think, this is a great opportunity for security functions, but they've got to do the work and earn the place as well.
Yeah, great story and a cautionary tale of why you should never assume. But as we kind of wrap up and move to the next segment, as we focus on proving strategic value and ROI, we'll keep it with you, Rachel. But security is often seen as a cost center. So how can CSOs position themselves and the security team as value drivers instead?
Well, I'm gonna actually go back to Rob mentioned earlier something a piece of work that we did a year or 18 months ago. I've always been really fascinated by how it was that the HR function went from quite literally being described. If you're going to go back through the annals of the Harvard Business Review as kind of data spods like me do, 25 years. There were debates within the Harvard Business Review about whether we needed the HR function anymore. Surely it should be, dismantled. We can do things differently within organizations. And, you know, spoiler alert, 25 years later, the Chief Human Resources Officer is on the board of many, if not most, really large multinational organizations, and they certainly have whatever your proclivity may be towards HR, they certainly have got the seat at the table, have managed to demonstrate their impact and their influence. And I think what I take from the HR story is some really important lessons about how you behave as a leader and as a function. And what I think the thing that they did was that they said to themselves, what are our assets as a community? Not what do we do, but what are our assets? And on the other side, what are the problems that business leaders need to solve for? And then draw your Venn diagram. And hopefully, there's some stuff that sits in the middle of that Venn diagram, which is problems that business leaders give a damn about and assets that we can put towards solving those problems to get them a solution. And it's what HR did really, really effectively. And, the story tells itself. And I think, for me, I think we've got to stop I kind of almost want the term cost center to be banned in security conversations because it's no excuse because there are lots of other cost centers within the organization that are at the top table. I mean, most of what the business does is a cost center. There's very few bits of most businesses that aren't, legal, finance, marketing, finance, the list goes on. We're not the only cost center. So that's not a reason to not have a seat at the table. It's just a reality that lots of other bits of the business have to work their way around. And the way that we get around that is by being really clear about what our assets are, being absolutely ruthless about applying them to business problems that are really critical for the business, getting comfortable about getting out of our lanes. I think it was Rob who said, you know, security function. What's really interesting is those security functions that are kind of asking themselves, what else could I do? How else could I help? How could our external network be helping the business in a time of geopolitical change? How could the fact that actually we're naturally very good collaborators help in a complex risk environment where what business leaders need is risk to be managed in quite a joined up and holistic and non sort of siloed way. So I think the imperative really is to stop using cost center as an excuse to kind of do what any self-respecting business leader does, which is says, what have we got and how do we use it to solve both for the stuff that the business just expects us to do, period, but also how can we apply that to the problems that business leaders have more broadly. And I think when you do that, you then sort of get into a posture of value. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that, as I said earlier, the really good security leaders are getting really fanatical about data. They are using the tools we're talking about today to kind of get much more granular about both prognosis and solution and then measurement and so on and so forth. And so I think getting into that posture of value, making sure that you are correct, you collecting the right data, going the extra mile. Counting stuff you do doesn't matter to anyone apart from you. That's an interesting data set for you as a function, but go the extra mile to figure out what data can I be collecting that shows me impact as opposed to activity. Um, and that's the direction of travel that security functions need to go on to kind of not just get the seat, but also kind of stay there. And there are many CSOs I know who are doing this. So I'm preaching to the choir, maybe for some people on this call. But we do, as a community, have a little distance to travel on this. And I guess one of the things we try to do as an organization is to collect up examples of where it's being done well and bring them together so that those organizations who maybe aren't quite there yet can kind of learn from the people who've gone before them and sort of fast track their way into being successful in this domain. But it's definitely the question that all security leaders need to be asking themselves right now.
Such a wonderful response, Rachel. I appreciate it. And I would have chosen a different word if I would have known that cost center was a trigger word for today's session. So, but
It's okay. Personal. I'm dealing with it. It's okay.
so good. Over to you, Chris. So when we think about the term resilience in flux, what are specific metrics or KPI that modern platforms allow CSOs to track that you would consider impossible, let's say 5 years ago?
Yeah, thanks, man. So I'll start with a sort of a tactical example or tactical list of KPIs. I'll cover resilience, security, and intelligence as functions. For each of these, the level of data that's available, the granularity that's possible, the types of analysis that and measurement that can be done with AI, enabled by by AI. I think across the board, we're seeing improvements there. But I want to finish with some broad principles that Rachel brought up because I think they're really important to stamp. So just in case there are new people, newer CSOs or more junior or resilience practitioners, let me start there on the tactical side. So in resilience, you should be measuring your recovery metrics. That's like your RTO or your recovery time objectives, your RPO, recovery point objectives, mean time to resolution, maximum tolerable downtime per critical process. Those are, broad recovery metrics. You should be looking at your program maturity. So that's like how many of your current processes do you have a BIA for, business impact analysis? Have you been percent of plans that you've been testing? And most importantly, outcomes. And so for each of the functions, resilience, security, intelligence, I want to focus on the outcomes. Unplanned downtime hours, number of incidents requiring plan activation, and so on. For security leaders, it's more like mean time to detect, respond, to contain. You should be measuring incident volume by severity, type, and location. For access control, false alarm, false positive rates. Your TRM leaders should be thinking about percent of travelers who have pre-trip risk briefings and post-incident accountability times, your duty of care timelines. For We have cyber leaders on the call as well, patch and vulnerability remediation, SLA attainment, and so on. For intelligence, we think a lot about time to first alert relative to event onset, and that's again one of the reasons why we're so excited about the relationship with our friends here at Dataminr. We think a lot about quality, so precision, true positives as a percent of total alerts. Recall, that's like events called divided by all the events that have occurred. Like, what's our coverage, our reliability, our accuracy in the polygons for the fires, and most importantly, it's what's the value, what's the relevance and actionability based on feedback. And for us, that's CSO clients, but our CSOs have customers as well, right? So your supply chain leaders, your HR leaders, your business unit leaders. I'll finish with the broad recommendations, and I'm going to tie it back to Rachel's comments that impact on the business, on the value of the business, on the people in the business is so much more important than the sort of internal metrics for your team. So I would think about, I'll use a few frameworks here as I conclude. in the Army, we had this concept called measure of performance, which is like, how am I doing against the things I said I would do, and then measures of efficacy. And that is, are the things that I said I would do really becoming effective for the overall organization? Are we improving the value of the org? And so clearly you want to be careful about not sending too many MOP, measures of performance metrics, out to the broader org, because people just don't care, but they care a lot about, are you changing the value, improving the value for the org? I think to do that, your partnerships with IT are really important. Your AI enablement's really important. You want to think about data and narrative. That's like, um, the statistics are really important, but also the narratives, the stories that stick in people's mind. The last point I'll share is just, as leaders, we want to get on the balcony. So what that means is, there, your business unit leaders, your HR leaders, we're all kind of in this broad dance with each other, your customers, your competitors, and you want to frequently, weekly, give time to yourself, space for yourself to think about, where are the challenges out in this space, and being able to see where the centers of kind of power and influence and authority, and where can you find allies to create, with your data, with your narratives, to create change in the orgs that you think you need to see.
Ah, lovely. We are unfortunately at time, and as much as I would love to do this for the remainder of my day, that is unfortunately not an option. So I'm going to go ahead and flash the QR code on the screen one more time for the Clarity Factory 2026 survey. If you didn't have a chance to do that beforehand, please do it now. It is right here for you. And I just wanted to say thank you to everyone, Rob, Chris, Rachel. This was amazing. This was fascinating. I loved every minute, and I really appreciate your time and your guys' insight as we kind of dove into this topic.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Rachel and Justin. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.